Brought to you by MuleSoft. Visit MuleSoft.com to find out how MuleSoft's API-led approach to connecting apps, data, and the Internet of Things can revolutionize your businesses.
Hi, I'm David Berlin, Editor-in-Chief of ProgrammableWeb.com, here with a special edition of the Developers Rock podcast. Now, every month in Washington, D.C., there is a special meetup that takes place on the first Tuesday of the month. It is the DC-Area API Meetup, and this is where many of the technologists from across the federal government get together to talk about what works and what doesn't work in the way of providing APIs from government agencies, not only for internal consumption by developers, but for external consumption as well. Now, if you're interested in attending that meetup, I suggest you go to meetup.com and search for it by searching DC API User Group. And if you go to that webpage, you'll find not only the upcoming meetup and who will be speaking at it, but you may even find a schedule and other users who are attending the meetup. If you want to find out more about the meetup, you can go there. You can also go to the meetup's Twitter feed at DC_API_meetup as the Twitter handle. So I hope to see you there at the meetup. Meanwhile, what we decided to do is we're going to record all of the different presentations and publish them not only to ProgrammableWeb, but also to ProgrammableWeb's YouTube channel at www.youtube.com/ProgrammableWeb. These presentations will not only include what the speaker is saying, but you'll be able to see their slides as well. And if you go to the version that's on ProgrammableWeb.com, we'll include a full transcript of everything the presenter said. So I encourage you to check those out. So for now, I'm going to let you go and watch this next presentation that was filmed at the DC API User Group Meetup. Thanks very much, and I'll see you soon.
My name is Benoit Brookens. I'm the founder of a data science, big data analytics company based mostly in Hong Kong. So I'm here visiting. I'm a Washingtonian natively. And we are essentially an alternative data company. Alternative data is essentially this intersection of liberal arts and technology, like Steve Jobs talked about. It's basically the acceptance that every industry could benefit from some other context that their industry might not be currently appreciating. So for instance, it's like a farmer using social media data to understand the impact of, say, avocado prices. So, or looking at, say, shipping information in order to anticipate demand or supplies of competing products in the market from a foreign place. I know that's a little high level, but in a nutshell, we're providing event-based intelligence for decision makers to make better decisions. So in 2017, we were selected as the most promising fintech company in the world by the London Stock Exchange and the UK government. So here's us opening the UK Stock Exchange, and I'm in the middle. So anyway, the focus of this topic is just kind of demonstrating one use case that we focus what we're building. And I'm not going to spoil it by telling you actually what we're building yet. But for financial investors, they have a problem because they are now inundated by alternative events that previously never drove impacts to the level that they do now. For example, a Trump tweet is sending markets up and down, disrupting Boeing, disrupting all types of things, trade war developments happening as they happen, force people to kind of put on many different new hats to assess what the impact is on their businesses and maybe potentially their investments. And in this case, talking about APIs, I'm looking at the financial market as just a simple time series data set. Something measured over time, like end-of-day sales, end-of-day prices of any variety of volumes. So essentially, one use case is basically in Hong Kong. Last September, I encountered my very first typhoon. It was a Typhoon 10. In fact, this is like a Category 5, like the one that had recently devastated the Bahamas. And so buildings are swaying like 3 feet back and forth. And I was in a panic wondering, what should I do? Should I have hopped on a flight and gone to Thailand or somewhere where it was calmer and nicer in order to spend my day? But I hung back. It was my first typhoon. And I rushed to the grocery store like everyone else. And rushing to the grocery store, grocery store shelves were empty. And so I thought that was interesting because it happens every time. So what I did was, sitting at home and you having technology like the way I have, I was wondering, well, how could I turn the observations that I was making into some insight that might or might not be reflected as a hypothesis in the financial markets? So essentially, what we did, I backtested it. So I took every single typhoon 8 or more over the past 5 years, and I started correlating it to particular stocks. And I was looking for good risk-adjusted returns, meaning that these stocks typically exhibited good risk-reward ratios in the financial markets. And what I uncovered was 2 big brands. One was a non-alcoholic beverage company, and 2 was a brewery company. These are the second biggest in their class, meaning this is the second biggest non-alcoholic brewery brand. A beverage brand. They sell juice, tea, water, coffee, etc. And this is the second biggest beer company in China. And so I'm in Hong Kong, by the way. So 100% of the time over the past 5 years, these 2 stocks are reacting. I found that really interesting. And this is not investment advice. I'm not telling you to go buy any stocks. This is not an investment show. But essentially, what I started doing in my thinking process was that I was, for the first time, taking something called unstructured data. And unstructured data is growing at about 12.8 terabytes every minute. And these things are coming out of a variety of things, from cameras to sensors to government websites. And they're all actually not in a condition or format to do any type of analysis. Meaning if you wanted to, say, understand the impact of, say you own a sandwich shop and you also have a gelato in the back, and you want to know, do you sell more sandwiches or gelatos on a rainy day? How many businesses could actually do that? So not many. And in fact, there are POSs that have the data for their sales, but there's no API that they can just plug into and say, hey, it's a rainy day in DC. What should I do? Should I go make more sandwiches, or should I just keep the gelato cold? Right? So we are building one of the first APIs in the world that is commercially available for the private sector to begin to do these things far more casually. So this is unstructured data. It's growing at a rapid pace. And what we're doing essentially is turning the world into many different types of calendars. So these are like religious calendars, blockchain industry calendars, weather seasonal calendars, sports calendars, weather calendars, natural disasters, political products, etc. So these things at a product calendar would be like iPhone release. At a corporate calendar level, it would be CEO speech, WWDC conference, etc. And so you can kind of analyze the impact of this on, say, other things that you might take for granted. It's not just about Apple stock. It can be about transportation. It can be about a smart city demanding, well, how much traffic jams, how much of a traffic jam do we actually have? If you wanted to even model that concept before you got to a quantitative metric, you kind of have to start with something. Kind of start with an event. Start with something you can test, a hypothesis. So we're building a way for someone to take that unstructured data, turn it into something simple that's never been kind of innovated on, which is a calendar. We all have a calendar on our phone. It's pretty much the most neglected app in our phones. It's not really innovated over the past iPhone 1. It's like schedules, meetings, etc. But it's very, very powerful. So we are taking this distributed chronology, meaning when we structure the data from the internet, say religious calendars, we tell you where it comes from. We got it from this website, or we got it from this place, or we got this article from this governmental source. And we're basically classifying this as a knowledge graph. So you can say, well, this is a iPhone product release. We can use a graph database to link that to, say, its competitors. Well, iPhone is a product line competitor of the Galaxy, right? And that's how it's related to Samsung. And this iPhone is also a handheld device, so it's related to other handheld devices, but it's mobile, so it's these kind of things. So we're kind of classifying all of these objects and events and activities into a variety of different things. Blockchain is simply not a buzzword here. We are using primarily immutable databases. An immutable database is simply a mechanism for recording something as a version of itself over time. So we don't delete anything, actually. We don't delete any data. As you know, when you have like different types of editing that happens at Wikipedia, you need things change, and you might have a deletion. You don't want to suffer from deletionism. So if there's an update of an economic record, we will say revised rather than deleted, replaced. So anyway, we are building an integrated global calendar in simple sense of sports, industry, beliefs, economics, weather, and there are hundreds of thousands of calendars that we build. So to give you an example why this is important, again, these are all financial examples, not investment advice. So we were looking at Apple stock. Say you wanted to go back to 2010. Like 2010, what was going on in 2010? Cities don't have memories, and neither do markets or people really that good anymore. You want to just highlight this little area. Well, what was going on in this spike? You can't go to Google and just say, well, what was going on here? You really can't. You can't just type that. There's no database search for that. There's no research engine. People pay a lot of money to find that out. So we built a database that was point in time. You could go 831 through 98. What was taking place between those ranges? So you can see the Samsung Epic 4G, which might have been an Epic failure because the Epic doesn't exist. It came out, you have iOS 4.1, and you have the iOS released. And these two things were really interesting. And funny enough, there was a really interesting correlation between iOS announcements and moon phases during Steve Jobs' lifetime that many people did not actually extract, but kind of we were able to find this serendipity of fact that uncovered really interesting correlations that might go beyond spuriosity into something really interesting. So again, we're building this kind of as an API. If you have, this doesn't have to be just stock data. This could be virtually anything. This could be, you have a sushi shop and there's a sushi expo in town and maybe your sushi sales go down. It could be anything, really. So keep going further. We compete with some existing players like Kensho, Bloomberg, Thomson Reuters, the financial sector. We cover others. But what makes us special is that you can bring your own data. We're not locking you into financial data sets or telling you can't add in Willy Wonka Chocolate Factory's event or things that are taking place in your small town. This is a very open-ended API database to allow people to kind of do event-based intelligence. So essentially, I don't want to bore you with this, but this is just a sample of a dashboard. Basically, to do this would require sourcing, structuring, cleaning, executing all this information, but a decision maker can come here and kind of get these insights. This is just one example of what we've done with this. We built what you see is what you get if-then drag and drop algo builder. So essentially, if there was a tropical cyclone above 8 or more, this actually references an API, a data set, that historical data set, and you could say buy 100 shares of the market. So this could be used in someone's home, or it could be used in a variety of places. If there's a weather event, if it's above 70 degrees, turn on the ACs in the home. So we're kind of experimenting with different ways to play with this type of information, basically being API first. So we're kind of having a really creative exercise and we're open to feedback and ideas as to how people would think about this. So this is just another financial use case. This product was available, not available now. We kind of took it and put it back on our shelves, and it allows someone to just casually do sampling, data sampling. If I were to look at this type of logic between these periods of time, what could I infer? What historical data would be presented? And then you could run thousands of these algorithms at the same time, technically. So again, we're just kind of taking this idea of a calendar, and we're taking it to automation, taking it to big data analytics, and we're not focusing on just black box AI or anything. It's really about transparent explainability of things that I believe, things that I see, things that I feel, and being curious about them and thinking if they have any value. So I can go to a real demo. We kind of focus on, and we don't really focus on government, but we do from the perspective of focusing on smart cities. So we have a smart city focus. Cities that want to basically uncover how does traffic, how does weather, how is it impacting in their city, and how are events that they may be aware or not aware of impacted us. And so part of my team, I have a background as a trader. Pete, some of our team comes from names like SAP, et cetera, et cetera. And I'll give you a demo quickly of how it works. Any questions so far?
We show us the API?
Huh?
We show us the API?
Yeah, I can show some of the API. Yeah, let's see. Let's see, how do I do it? I hope I'm not talking too fast. I'll show you the GUI version of the API. So essentially, this is, geez, I wish I could see this. Can I slide this? Cool. So essentially, you have essentially you have a calendar here. Again, you can. This is just kind of a sample. This is just a small data sample. But I would scroll to the bottom to keep it simple. You have a variety of things taking place on, what day was that? On the 29th of September. It was kind of scrolling through this, and you can see things like the Russian Grand Prix, the Berlin Marathon, a variety of things. So let's just click on, say, the Berlin Marathon. So in the Berlin Marathon, you can basically see that there's actually one listed here. So that was scraped. Let's see if I can find something with a lot more history. And this is a demo, so some things I didn't test these examples before I made them. This is the FIA. This is the Formula Grand 3 end. Oh wow, only one of those two. That's so funny. I'll go back in time and find something interesting. So I'll go back to October 31st, 2017. And on this date, I'm scrolling really quickly, but you have a variety of different types of activities happening. You have unemployment rate being reported in Japan. It's Halloween, obviously. These are candlestick patterns and SEC filings, and we kind of clustered them together for this example. You had a quarterly profit increase of this particular stock ticker. You had things like crypto projects were releasing certain versions. You had a car ramming accident in New York City, unfortunately. You had things like, let's see, let's keep scrolling, astrological events, Formax. And so I'll show you what you can do with this and how you could use the API. Let me find one good one, for instance. Let's just say the SEMA show. It's an auto show based in Las Vegas. And so it runs every couple of years. And just 3 examples. You can see that this is scraped from sema.org. And so what you can do in this is user API. You can add in essentially a date. So manually, if you're doing your own research, you want to add in, say, earnings releases, a calendar, et cetera. I can put in, say, today's date. I can just do test, and then I can source. I'm just going to do DCAPI.org. And so what it's doing is essentially it's writing. This is not signing into the blockchain in this example, but what you're doing is you use your API to store simply a time series data set of date time, and you're able to see it in full chronology in terms of this is all the start days of the auto show. So let's just run this, and we can use the API to ask a question to it. So I'm going to put in SEMA auto show, and I'm going to look at Ford, right? And so Ford Motors. So Ford Motors trading in New York. They also trade in London, etc. But we're going to use it here, and we're going to do basically look at Ford since. Well, we only know it's 3 events, so we're not going to be too fancy. And we're just going to do an analytic, right? We're doing an analytic basically purchasing at the closing price on the first date of the event, and we're going to sell it at the closing price following the event. And what we're doing is we're exploring this data kind of exhaustively, although there's only 3 examples of this. You can basically see that we've turned this into plain text. This is a 5-day trade for the auto show, considering the last occurrences and latest being in 2018. Entering 0 days before the event. This pattern has an average gain loss, etc. And so what it's doing is allowing you to kind of explore your hypothesis about how some event may or may not correlate based on historical activities. You can see 2017 it dropped, 2018 it rallied, and you can see what happens in between. So starting 1 day, going into the future, we currently have the setting on 5 days, but I could use a slider to explore that. I could say, well, if it's 30 days, here's how it works. One example is you can search. So the database is pretty cool. I'll show you one thing that people take for granted. Like, one other tool we built. It's called the Almanac. It basically is a screener. So you can essentially search all the different types of events from Saudi oil discoveries to Kentucky Derby, etc. And you can do a massive scan using our API to say, let's just look up July 4th. So July 4th. And let's just purchase at the closing price of the first day following July 4th. And we're going to hold for arbitrarily 2 days. Just to give an example of the API. Again, this can be any time series data set in a business. And we're just simply going to run that across all US stocks. So S&P 500, this is my last example. No Hong Kong, no crypto, no FX. And what you can do in 1 second is basically take any real world concept and event, and you can basically screen across all of the markets in seconds and get a result of all the securities or variables in your business or factors or employees, or whatever these time series might be. And you can sort by, you can get your tops and tails about, you can see Walmart's in there for July 4th, you can see Nike's in there for July 4th, and you can explore these patterns. Anyway, the idea is that you can turn a calendar into an API you can finally use. And so we're presenting this as a concept for other types of businesses that might be relevant to government, for market surveillance, or for other types of reasons. So come and talk to me if you have any questions or ideas. Thank you.